I want to ask you guys before you leave about what happens next. So if, as we suspect, at the end of tonight, Hillary Clinton still has a significant pledged delegate lead, do you think that Bernie Sanders should go all the way to the convention and try to flip the superdelegates, even if there's no indictment, and say, no, I'm more electable than Donald Trump? All you superdelegates should try to switch over to me and make me the nominee. Or no, just suspend his campaign for today?
I absolutely think he should go all the way to convention. I mean, Bernie Sanders is running for president, but Bernie Sanders is representing so many people in this country who have felt like their voices have never been heard. And I think that is why he should go all the way to convention. Because you see millions of people already in America, if you go on social media, if you track it online, who are saying themselves that they want to show up to Philadelphia, that they want to encourage people, they want to encourage the DNC to open their doors to them. I mean, you have so many independent voters, you have so many young people like myself who I identify as a Democrat, but I want to feel welcomed into the Democratic Party. And right now I don't necessarily feel welcome to the Democratic Party. So I think it's important for Bernie to go so that our voices are represented. And also, I mean, regardless of what your opinions are of the polls with Bernie beating Trump and Hillary being neck and neck with Trump, right now those are the polls that we have. So I think it's a very important case for him to show up.
Josh, you seem to indicate that you agree with that in our earlier conversation.
I do. Well, I think there's a historic thing that's happening right here.
Yep.
You know, I mean, the Clintons brought the Democrats over to become this hybrid party with a lot of Democratic values and a lot of Republican values. And you've seen that carry through the Obama administration. You've seen that Democratic incrementalism, right, this establishment incrementalism, hasn't worked. It hasn't protected us on climate. It hasn't protected us environmentally on fracking. It hasn't protected us from the ravages of the big banks. All of the income gains of the last 8 years went to the top 1%. What you're seeing in Bernie Sanders is a resurgence of actually the Democratic Party before the Clintons. The Clintons had to triangulate to beat Reagan. That was true. And that was, for that, I'm actually quite grateful for them because I remember how awful those years were. But the truth of the matter is that excluded the progressive wing of the Democrats, and it created this situation where you punch the progressive and you punch the hip and you say, oh, you got no place else to go. You got no place else to go, environmentalists. You got to vote for us, even though we're actually moderate Republicans in our stance, especially on the environment. So and a lot on finance and all these other issues, crime and prisons. All these things that really, really turn your stomach and you got no place to go. So what Bernie Sanders and our campaign, I think, represents is a chance for us to reassert the true values that are inside the Democratic Party from FDR, and those days built the greatest nation on earth. We need them back. We see economic inequality, social stratification, racial, institutionalized racism, economic and environmental degradation in ways that we've never seen before. And it's happened under Democratic presidency for the last 8 years. And this is what this insurgency and what this political revolution is about. So absolutely, we cannot be excluded. If we get excluded at this point, I don't know. It's scary to think of what will
Josh,
happen.
let me just ask this real quick. So I agree with you on progressive priorities. I agree with you on the insurgency more than you could imagine. But is it hypocritical to then say, well, the superdelegates shouldn't have counted, but now that they do count, we lost on the pledged delegates. Nonetheless, we should use the superdelegates to win the overall primary.
To be honest, Cenk, the whole system is so nuts. You have some caucus states, you have some primary states. The popular vote, we don't even know if it matters because in caucus states, would it have tilted the balance the other way? I posted some of this stuff on Facebook, and I had just been to Canada. We showed our film in Canada, and people were like, what's a delegate? You know what I mean? And they were
people
like, why do you, wait a minute, what's a co-payment?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're like, we have single payer, and when we vote, we just vote, and then the one has more votes wins.
Right.
This whole system is so insane, and it needs major, major reform, because also beyond those things, like who's a delegate, who's a superdelegate, who's a caucus state, who's a primary state, there's a lot of voter suppression going on, people calling it the new Jim Crow. Or as Greg Powell called it, James D. Crow, election analyst, or whatever. The idea that the system has become so obtuse and so distant from common people, and I think that's what the Sanders campaign is a reaction
and the
to.
caucuses are that way. But I think it's a fair point. Like, why should they stop at the convention if you don't have the requisite number of delegates?
Those are the rules.
They should keep going. Those are the rules. And if this is about, listen, Democrats have for so long criticized Republicans for be exclusive, for only agreeing with the point of view that they have in their head. So Democrats have to allow that conversation to continue and to happen. But there also has to be some acknowledgement that once the die is cast, there has to be a way out, whatever that way out is, and acknowledgement that, hey, it didn't work on July 25th, or it did, and fabulous, and we're off to the races.
So, you guys make such an interesting point. Honestly, I hadn't thought of this. What if it was the Republicans? If Ted Cruz or Donald Trump was behind in pledged delegates, and obviously they don't have the system on the Republican side, but if they did, they were behind in pledged delegates, but they could still win at the convention with superdelegates. There is no way in the world Ted Cruz would have given up or Donald Trump would have given up. And everybody in the press would have thought that was the most natural thing in the world.
Yeah.
Well, of course you're going to have a contested convention, and of course the Republicans are going to go fight at the convention. But when it comes to
brings us back
Democrats,
to the media and the
right?
narrative.
I mean, so now
But
the
also,
three of us are
that's
more.
such a hypothetical. The superdelegate system is so ridiculous. It's just so absurd to have it. It's there, though, and those are the rules. So you're talking about the Republican hypothetical.
But to Shay's point, the
That's to
media,
Shay's
that's why
point.
we're talking about this right now.
Yeah.
But
Because to
we've
be honest, these issues are not absurd or hypothetical. Hillary Clinton is taking money from Exxon Shell and
Whatever,
Chevron.
but the
Bernie's
issues
not.
are the
Hillary
issues. I'm
Clinton's
just
poor
talking about
fracking. Bernie's not. There are real reasons why we're here.
I'm
You
talking
know,
about the
and
people who
they're
don't
not
know what a
about-
caucus is and don't know what a delegate is and certainly don't know what a superdelegate is, why they're there. I mean, smart people who don't know these things. And that's what has to also change, and that has to be established, I think, at this convention. I mean, they're not going to do it now, but between this convention and the next. It's ridiculous.
So, by the way, I've told this to Bernie Sanders when I interviewed him. I don't think the superdelegates should count unless it's an extraordinary circumstance like an indictment, which would really, I mean, if you don't use them for that, then you should disband them immediately, right? But, to be fair, the Hillary Clinton team is also being hypocritical because they thought the superdelegates should count all along. So now, meaning that, yes, the superdelegate voting is super important and should be taken into account and should be part of the process. So if Bernie Sanders turns around and goes, okay, agreed, so let's let them vote on July 25th, wouldn't it be in a hypocritical position for Hillary Clinton to say, no, superdelegates shouldn't count?
Of course it would be.
That would be incredibly hypocritical, right? So let's just be fair about both of those sides.